Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Elementary. So this week's case dealt with Eugene. Now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't bring it up last episode. It's kind of like, hey, he's back. Because the last time we saw him was like one of the last season. He was like doing stand-up comedy after the whole like body in the morgue blew up and killed a woman that he kind of had a thing for. That, that kind of messed with anyone, and it kind of just made him kind of a little off kilter a little bit. So he took some time off, and now he's back. So, that's good. I completely didn't bring that up last episode, so I felt like bringing it up this episode. But basically brought them kind of a case to Joan and Charlotte, because basically there's a dude that died from basically the chemicals you'd find in a tranquilizer, specifically an animal tranquilizer, but it's like the thing is it was in the contents of his stomach, which looked like it was sausage, but apparently it wasn't sausage. It was actually a person. So basically he ate a person who had that drug, that tranquilizer in their system. I was thinking like, oh, this is going to come back as like, oh, why this specific guy got killed. Honestly, it just seems like, by the way the episode played out, it seems like it was just a random accident. It just happened to be that guy who got the quote unquote tainted meat that was actually human. Just human. What I found very interesting is what Sherlock does is he sniffs the bag with the contents of his stomach, and just everyone else is just kind of looking disgusted. And you see that moment where after he inhales it, he takes a dip, and then you almost hear him kind of like you can hear it almost coming up, and he's pushing back the vomit. He's like, yeah, you have to push it back. You can almost hear the tears kind of falling out of his eyes, and just the way his voice is just kind of choking a little bit, just like, ugh. He's like, oh yeah, I got some good evidence from it and everything. It's like, that's Sherlock Holmes for you, always doing the hard jobs. I found some evidence during that. Yeah, I'm sure you could have really waited till you got someone else to kind of run it through the system to maybe find something else to it, but it's like he found one of the ingredients that way, so I guess it worked out that way. They ended up finding out that the guy that got ground up is Wok. I'm sorry, because his name's like Joaquin. Essentially, he's part of this company / group that was basically trying to make not necessarily kind of a substitute meat, not in the sense of like tofu or like, something like a vegan burger or something like that. More like they basically took the cells from animals, like say for like a cow or whatever, and then they took that to grow meat. That way it's it's a more humane way of, getting meat just by artificially making it. But, the question is like, oh, who did that? Like, who killed Wok? Was it for this purpose? At first, it's kind of like, okay, obviously, it's kind of like a big, meat industry company that might have a say in that, because turns out they actually had a spy at the company. Interesting enough, it's just kind of like, hey, you come here investigating this one thing and you end up stumbling upon espionage. But it's like, the lady is like, I signed up, to inform the company I'm working for. I didn't come here to I wasn't down for murder. And then it eventually all leads them to like actually find out, it's like, oh, actually the company actually hired 2 hitmen, a father-daughter team, which is kind of interesting. You don't come across that often. It's like, when do you actually come across that? Not the point. Usually it's like when it comes to assassins, usually it's just a one-man team, but it's like, not only is it a duo, it's a father and daughter team too, so that just made it really interesting. But it's like, oh, actually they had absolutely nothing to do with the murder, because they were actually going to kill them. Like, the reason why they had his photos and his routine down is because they actually had planned out his murder, but the company that had hired them canceled that because it was no longer necessary. Which is, once again, it's like, first you're stumbling upon espionage, and then you stumble upon assassins, and still not connected to the case. They are connected, and in the case of the assassins, the only reason why the company called it off, because basically with this, basically it's like, was it the FDA or somebody basically looking at the workings of the meat in itself, and it's like, basically the meat was classified as a substitute meat, like I brought up earlier, something like tofu or a vegan burger. Now, this to a big company won't mean anything because the purpose of it was to replace meat itself. But if it's a substitute meat, that means it gets kind of like it's secondary. It's not like a main primary substitute. It's just kind of like, okay, there's alternatives, like I said, tofu and vegan burgers, but it's like even they don't have the big impact that, meat does. Like even as they can't compensate for just the sheer force people would want meat. Like meat completely outclasses it in the factors of what people would go for. But if it was classified as a meat, then that would be a different story. But what you end up finding out is that essentially Walk's work was tampered with because actually the guy that he that worked under him, Brandon, essentially he changed the data up a little bit. At first, he's kind of like I was doing it just to screw over Walk, but and then eventually you find out there was a reason behind it because the person who actually killed Walk was his boss, well, their boss, and basically had Brandon kind of shift up the data to just kind of because they wanted to keep the meat as a substitute meat because by keeping it a substitute meat they make it so that this meat it opens them up to a more broader potential demographic of people to eat, like people who are who are religious and only eat kosher. Then it's like, oh, a food that doesn't harm animals, it's made, and if it's kept as a substitute, then there's guidelines to those religious aspects that would be like, even if it was classified as a meat, you wouldn't necessarily, it wouldn't fall under the category of, I don't understand. Like I'm like a lot, some of it kind of like went over my head a little bit. So I'm not clear cut as to why that necessarily made the difference between it being classified as a meat or, well, there is a lot more to it that Sherlock explained, but me being an idiot, I didn't really understand a lot of it. I'm just going to be blunt about it. But essentially that's what it would have came down to. Essentially it was about making more money because you have more of an opportunity to, reach a different demographic of people who, don't eat meat because it harms animal for religious reasons. So they did it for money reasons, and essentially they cornered Brandon, but he didn't want to talk. I was like, part of me is like, why would you side with the guy? It's like, he's a murderer. He's using you as a scapegoat for murder. I mean, essentially, because he's like making you an accomplice in all of this. But then it turns out it's like, I understand, like, I don't agree with his reasoning, but I understand why he did it because it's like, oh, his mortgage got paid off in full for a home. Plus, the fact is that if he was a part of this, the fact is that he played his own part in it. It also means that he would reap the rewards, not just the boss, but he would too. But Sherlock and Watson had met with some high-ranking people who kind of have to say so in that type of situation about the food. And so basically they wouldn't give their support to be like, hey, this is a good food to bring to market. We won't partake in it because we found out it's like, because we are against murder, and it's like, hey, someone was murdered to make this come the fruition. So it's like, hey, we're backing down. And so they were able to convince Brandon, mainly because they were able to grease the wheels a little bit by being like, hey, the fact of the matter is, if you, turn on him, there's a good chance that you could still participate in all of this and, reap some of the profit too, if it does kind of play out that way, maybe because it's like, hey, you didn't really do anything. You did some computer stuff. You changed some details. He's the one that actually pulled a trigger. And even the boss guy was kind of like, hey, don't believe them. They could be completely lying to you. But hey, like I said, it's kind of interesting how easily someone's alliance is shifted when it's kind of like, hey, I didn't necessarily do anything wrong, but it's like, hey, and maybe, the real, asterisk there is the fact is that he could still get some of the profit by turning him in. I mean, probably in his mind is like, I could actually get more of the profit because he's no longer there to kind of get his cut of it. So, it's not like he did it for the most noble of reasons. Obviously, it was, to cover his own hide, like I said, because he had an opportunity to before, but he decided not to go for it. So it's not like he's a good person. What I love the most about it was Joan's reaction when Brandon wouldn't turn on his boss, because she's like, we took down Moriarty, the whole situation with Sherlock's brother, even like kind of like the whole situation with I think she kind of referenced the whole situation from last season that dealt with that cabal that, Sherlock's dad is kind of running. It's like, we took down some of these very dangerous people, and it's like, we weren't able to capture or kind of convict these essentially jerk offs, these idiots who got away by dumb luck. It's not like, those other people, it's like, oh, these are some smart, powerful, intellectual people. It's like, no, these are two nobodies who got lucky. So I guess from a professional standpoint, it's just like, if you got beat, at least let it be by someone worthy. It's kind of like they're not even worthy opponents. They're just kind of like two idiots who got lucky, which I just thought that was kind of interesting seeing that perspective come from Joan. I mean, it seemed like something Sherlock would say, not necessarily say, but had that same mentality about, I guess. And it's just surprising to hear it come from her directly. And another side of the episode was that Joan ended up finding out from an associate of Sherlock's named Holder. He was basically dropping off. It's not a crown. It's called a coronet. Don't know what that was for. Basically, the guy doesn't want to be in Sherlock's debt. And it's like he's paid Sherlock time and time again in the past, but Sherlock's never cashed checks. Nevertheless, the point is, he ends up telling Joan, like, oh yeah, haven't seen Sherlock for a while, because apparently Sherlock's not been going to his meetings. And Joan's like, okay, that's weird. It's like he lied and said that he was going to his meetings. And then the fact is, basically the guy, Holder, was thinking like, well, we just assume he kind of went somewhere else, for help. And that's kind of what Sherlock was telling them. So Joan kind of asked him, oh, how was the meeting and everything? And then he was kind of like, oh yeah, it went fantastic, not telling her anything. It's like, that's fine as usual. And then she kind of tries to pry a little bit, asking like, okay, so, the fact of the matter is, even though I'm not your sober companion anymore, you can still talk to me and stuff like that. He's, in his mind, he's like, there's a difference. It's like, why would I tell you about my whole recovery system? Because it's like, at that time, sure, you were my sober companion, so you needed to know that, but we're partners now, and we work together, so it's like, that's not pertinent information. Which, I mean, granted, I think it is pertinent information. I mean, granted, he didn't say pertinent information, but it's like, it kind of is important, because it's like, you're the person she's going out there doing this job with, so she has to make sure you're in the right state of mind, so your condition is important to her. I mean, it's a little, like, I don't know. It's just like, I guess because it's something he feels like he shouldn't talk about. Because it is something they don't think talk about. Because it is something like Watson, since becoming his partner, hasn't really brought that up. Because it's like, it's not in her job description anymore. Because I guess also in a way, she probably feels like that's too personal, because she probably feels like, well, for one, she's probably, well, he's going to his meetings and everything's okay. I can see that he's okay. He's going through his meetings. He's had, probably since, back in his relapse at the end of season 3, he probably had her a little concern, but subsequently since then, I think she's okay with not really worrying about it. But it's because it's like, she sees that he's kind of, found a stable system to keep himself from going down that path. But, just also feel like you don't really ask your partner if they're kind of falling off the wagon a little bit, but I don't know, I guess because she feels like it'd be insulting to ask him, so that maybe that's another reason why she hasn't, but more so than anything, I think she feels like she doesn't need to. But now it kind of brought up the questions like, oh, he's not going to his meetings, is he relapsing in some shape or form? When she does track him down, though, she finds him in a park. It looks like he's about to play violin with another group of people in the park playing, and then basically later on Charlotte's like, okay, so you figured it out. Holder told you didn't, because I knew you were following me. And she's like, okay, so why aren't you going to your meetings anymore? And his explanation is he's bored. That he stopped going because, he said, he always told Watson he's a very intellectual guy. It's like he's the smartest person around, which Joan's not denying. He's extremely smart, smarter than most people he'll come across, or that most people that she's know, he's the smartest one. But he's a bit of an idiot saying that, like, he doesn't need to go anymore. Because to him, it's like, he's sitting there, he's like, I'm bored. And he feels like his boredom will be more so, I guess, in a sense, he needs something challenging to kind of keep him, like, for the longest time, it provided some kind of sustenance for him to keep going, but now it kind of doesn't do that anymore, because now he's getting bored and everything, and he's like, he wants to find other ways. The kind of the metaphor he used is kind of like steeping close to the edge. It's almost like, you see someone who gets close to the edge of there's someone who stands behind and looks at the Grand Canyon and looks down at the edge. Looks at it, and then there's someone else who gets close to the edge. He's like, the fact is that he found a new way of handling things, and it's like, oh, the tiptoe close to the edge and stare down at the abyss below. And then you have Joan being like, you're a freaking idiot, you arrogant jerk. She calls him an arrogant jerk twice, because it's like, she's like, the fact of the matter is you're not the only one that's bored. You being bored isn't something just because you're special in that regard. A lot of people get bored, but the fact of the matter is you stay there because it's part of your system. It's like, it plays a role in his system, because like, he doesn't think about it this way, but it's like Joan, Gregson, Belle are all part of his system, and so is going to those meetings. It's like, would you cut Watson out of your life, because you got bored? I mean, I get for him it wouldn't be that case, but still, it'd be, in my mind, I look at it as the same thing as like, would you cut Watson out of your life? No, because she's a crucial part. Not only is she your partner, she's also a crucial part of your system, and so does going to those meetings. Whether you're bored or not, she's like, because one problem is he doesn't always speak his mind, and he always feels like, oh, what if I end up saying something like, well, the pointing out fact is I'm the most intellectual person here. It's like, yeah, you're an arrogant jerk, sure, but it's like, you're not speaking your mind. You're not saying everything that you need to say. And it's helpful to speak everything that's on your mind, because it's like to pass on those concerns to other people and whatnot. And I mean, at the end of the episode, he does go to the meeting. He brings up the fact is that he was arrogant in thinking that he could do this on his own. And that's the whole thing. That's another thing. You can't do this on your own, because even Watson was like, I believe you should go to those meetings, but the fact of the matter is you're your own person. I'm not your sober companion anymore, so I don't really have the right to tell you what to do with your life. So if you want to go about it that way, then do it. So it does seem like he is going back to his meetings, because initially I was thinking like this whole thing, I thought the whole violent thing, I was like, oh, maybe that's his way of dealing with the most recent breakup with his girlfriend. But then it was like, no, that doesn't seem to be the case. I wonder will that kind of ever kind of come back up. I mean, because I asked for it, like I kept bringing it up. It's like, oh, where's his girlfriend? His girlfriend. First episode she's in, oh, it's like, oh, now they're breaking up. Well, that sucks. But someone, I mean, just the way Sherlock is. I mean, because this is his first breakup, so I'm very interested to see how he handles it. It's because like I brought up that episode. It's like, because Jonah pointed out, it's like him and Moriarty didn't necessarily break up. She faked her death and everything. When she came back to his life and everything, he found out that she's actually an international criminal. So not necessarily broken up. And now we actually think about it in a twisted way. They technically never broke up, so technically they're still together. It's a stupid technicality, and I'm just saying. But it was just kind of, it isn't something you can handle on your own. It's like you need the people around you. Like I said, his system, there's a way to it. And it's like, maybe it's just because, I don't know. It was just kind of interesting to me that he would kind of think like that, because he's never thought like that before. I mean, not that I can recollect he was ever been like that. Maybe there were points he was like that, but just, I don't know. And it's just kind of an interesting thing. Like I said, I'm curious will we see more of that in the future or not. And like I said, I brought it up to the thought of like, will there be any ramifications from his breakup? Will we see him possibly meeting a new lady or something like that, or whatnot. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.